All right, so this morning we have Jessica Lee with us. She is an electronic resources and serials librarian at Valdosta State University in Valdosta, Georgia. Her professional presentations and publications focus on electronic resource management, troubleshooting errors for patrons, consortial data migrations, and copyright. So Jessica, join us.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you see my slides?
Yes, we can see your slides.
Okay, great. All right. So hi, everyone. Like Troy said, my name is Jessica Lee, and I'm the Electronic Resources and Serials Librarian at Valdosta State University, and I'm going to talk about license terms in Alma and GIL Find. All right, so just to give you a little background on myself, I've been in this position since November 2013. I don't personally handle negotiation and contracts. They're typically handled by our acquisitions librarian and our collection development librarian. Here at VSU, we have a limited amount of negotiation wiggle room. Our university contracts department handles most of the process. So we mostly just communicate with them that we need this contract signed, and if there's questions about it, then we answer them, but we aren't necessarily allowed to negotiate with the vendor or publisher. So why are licenses important? I'm sure this is kind of a given, but licenses are important for several reasons. It's a binding legal contract between your library and a vendor or publisher, and it usually stipulates how you can use their content, and the license terms can restrict or allow different uses of the content. When I first started in my position, I knew nothing about licenses or contracts or any of those things, and it wasn't until a few years in that I realized how important it was that I needed to know what that information was and how to find it. So before we migrated to Alma, I wanted a way to give our faculty and our staff a way to read what was in the licenses. And so before this, we used Coral, and so only ILL staff, myself, and a few others in acquisitions could actually see the licenses. But it was always my hope to have them more public because I thought it would provide important tools for faculty. And so this brings me to why add your license to GIL Find. You can add them in Alma and not display them in GIL Find, but I think it's important to have them in GIL Find as well. So in my experience, often faculty make assumptions about how a resource can be used, or they don't understand or know that there's a license agreement or contract that goes along with that resource. And in my experience, again, faculty heavily rely on adding PDFs to their D2L courses, even though the license may encourage or stipulate that they have to use persistent links instead. And I think this is a great learning tool for faculty to kind of better understand how they can use library resources within their courses. Another reason why you should add license terms to GIL Find, it's really important for circulation in your library loan staff to be able to view them, in my opinion. Some of them may need license terms to perform their job duties. Often licenses detail if and how a resource can be used for course reserves in their library loan. In my experience with working with our library loan staff, it's easier for them to look up a specific journal or ebook that they may need to know if they can add it to course reserves or ILL. It's easier for them to look it up in GIL Find than it is hunting down the actual license and knowing, well, this one is from Lyricist or ProQuest. And so that way, that license information is right there for them. So when you're adding licenses to Alma, there are different permission sets that you need in order to do this. To view licenses and license amendments, you must have one of the following roles. license manager, license viewer, selector, purchasing operator, or purchasing manager. We toyed with the idea of giving ILL staff permission to just view, but we thought that it would be easier if we just added the license terms to GIL Find. To manage the licenses and license amendments, you must have the following role: license manager. So the one nice thing about adding license terms to Alma is that you can add as little or as much information as you want to the licenses. Some required fields, but there aren't many. If your institution doesn't have a centralized place for licenses, Alma would be a great place to start. But here at VSU, our licenses live in our network drive in a folder that's only accessible to certain people. That's how we've historically done it. I'm not sure if we'll move away from that, but since I'm not the one who finds them or kind of manages them in the grand scheme of things, we kind of just leave them in our network drive for now, and I take out what I need. For me, I use the license feature in Alma to store important licensing information, so I don't have to constantly refer back to the actual license. And that way I look once and then it's in there. The main driving force behind adding our licenses was to display the license terms for staff and our patrons. I really wanted to encourage faculty to use persistent links instead of PDFs. And it'll probably be a hill that I'll die on. So when you set up a license, there's a few ways you can do it. I'm going to, this presentation is more kind of procedural. It'll kind of give you the step-by-step directions on how to upload licenses, but I'll focus on adding them manually. So when you get to the license, there's two ways to get to the license menu. You can either use the drop-down menu and click licenses and then just enter, and then it'll bring you to where your licenses are, or you can search through the acquisitions tab. It's towards the bottom. So when you set up a license, there's only a few required fields, as you can see: the name and the license code. And the license code can be the same. The license code and the name can be the same thing, or it can be something different. For this example, I just used ACM as a license code, but the license code's really just whatever you want it to be. And then you need a start date. So on this page, there's like more information, like the licensor signed by, when it was signed, an end date, where the license lives, and license review status. I don't tend to fill those things out because we're not really using the license feature to its full capacity. But in the license review status, it can be, there are other statuses besides accepted. I just default to add them to accepted once the license has been signed and we have the product, because that just works for me to know that it's done. So in the next menu is where you actually fill in the license terms. And you can rely on the drop-down menu or use the note fields. And you can fill in as much or little as I'll kind of go into further why later in the presentation on why we don't use the drop-down menus anymore. But they usually say permitted, not permitted, or information is not in the license or something like that. So there's different values that you can choose. And so you can really customize what the license terms are. You can also add your own license terms in the Alma configuration, which I'll show you where you can do that in a minute. So this is the order of license terms. This is in the Alma configuration. And so here you decide what order they'll be in and what section they'll be in. And so when you move what section they'll be in, that's what will change the previous screen. And then this is also where you display if it displays to the public or not. So you can display every single license term if you want to, or you can pick and choose what's important to you. And then the order in the section is where you decide where you want it within that section. And you can also add your own license terms. We added one where it says staff ILL notes, so that way we have a lot of the interlibrary loan information. Like if there's something specific about a resource on how it can be interlibrary loaned, we put that information there. Like I said, the previous screen, you can kind of change where things are, which will kind of alter what it looks like on your actual license page. So my example may not look like your screen when you're going forward. So the next thing in the license is inventory. So unfortunately, you can't add inventory at the license level. You have to add it at the collection or portfolio level. You can associate PO lines with a license. We don't. I haven't really gotten around to it, and since I'm not really using it to the full capacity, I just haven't gotten around to it. But it's something that you can add to kind of have everything associated with that license and collection all in one place. You can add amendments here. I think I read that you have to change the name if there is an amendment, but I haven't used this feature, so but it's something that if the license changes, that you can add amendments to it in Alma. You can also attach the license itself. I thought I had an example of it, but apparently I did not. But this is also a good way to kind of keep everything in one place if you're kind of struggling to figure out where you want all your licenses to live. So setting up licenses is not super complicated, but one thing that's important is also within the Alma configuration under fulfillment and discovery interface display logic, other settings, you need to click or check enable display of license information and then save. And that way that's the one thing that kind of, if you don't do this, then the licenses won't display in GIL Find. So adding the licenses to inventory are pretty straightforward. At the bottom, you can see it says license, and then you just search for which one, and then it'll have the license details that you can view. And this is kind of a close-up of it. So it's pretty easy to kind of make sure you can associate it to the right collection, to the right license. And we have one collection or one title where the license only applies to one portfolio or one title. And so I added the license specifically to that. The one nice thing is that this is in a larger collection that has other titles that aren't associated with that license. So it's nice that there's that feature of being able to add licenses to the actual portfolio by itself. So this is an example of that and how the license terms display. Some of this needs to be kind of edited. I added our license terms a long time ago, and I need to go back and edit them to be reflective of what the Galileo license terms look like. But you can see here that there's the interlibrary loan note, which says what interlibrary loan needs to do in order to actually loan these materials. So I find it to be useful for patrons that they can see this and ILL staff. So when I first started putting license terms in Alma, I just kind of copied and pasted everything that was in the license. But in hindsight, that wasn't really the best idea because no one wants to read that. That's a lot of information that's perhaps not relevant to the patron. So I encourage everybody, if you're going to put your licenses in Alma and display them in GIL Find, that you try and simplify the language. And so this is what our records look like today. So you can see there's a license for EBSCOhost, JSTOR, and ProQuest. The ProQuest one is from Galileo. Ken Hensley added these for all our ProQuest and EBSCOhost content. And the JSTOR one is ours. And you can see that that the language is pretty much the same. Some of these need to be edited so that way they'll say aloud that they all look identical, which I will go into in a minute about why we chose to do that. But you can see also that it says digital copy note. So that's a note field, as opposed to which the one above has digitally copy, which it says prohibited, which is which is in the drop-down menu, which we saw earlier. So that's just the one change that we're trying to do, is move from using the drop-down menus, which say permitted or prohibited, instead have the notes which say allowed or not allowed. So when we first migrated to Alma, I was really excited about the possibility of having the license terms in Alma and then displaying them in GIL Find. And so not long after we migrated, I began hounding Galileo to see if this would ever be a possibility. And it's been a passion project of mine to have all of our license terms visible, to really encourage faculty to use persistent links, and to really empower our ILL department to loan more materials. Historically, we didn't really loan a lot of e-content in the past with our other ILL librarian, but I think that was largely to the fact that she wasn't comfortable because she didn't know if she could with the different licenses. So in October 2019, myself as the chair of the Acquisitions ERM committee, I met with 3 other librarians, who were the ILL subcommittee chair, the OPAC committee chair, and someone else I cannot remember off the top of my head, as well as the acquisitions librarian for Galileo, John Stevens, to talk about adding licenses to our OPAC. I had found the University of Washington as an example, and we tried to kind of use the language that they used in their licenses. We presented our case to RACL, and it was approved that Galileo could add license terms to consortium purchase databases and collections. So this is the example I found. A lot of my examples were more of their like whole collections as opposed to like the individual titles. But this is one of the things that we were trying to avoid, was that there's a lot of information here that perhaps is not really relevant to what we need in our GIL Find and for our patrons. But we, as a subgroup, we tried to decide what was the most important and what language we wanted to use and what order we thought would be the most important. So this is what we presented to RACL. On behalf of the acquisitions chair, the ILL subcommittee chair, the OPAC committee chair, and the previous ILL subcommittee chair, we would like to propose that the license terms from Galileo license materials be put in Alma for all USG. And so I provide them with examples, and this is what we decided. We decided that we would have more patron forward information on top, and everything else for that's more faculty or more library staff would be on the bottom. So course facts, an electronic link term note. And then we would say if it was allowed or not allowed. If limitations, we would say use link in D2L. Concurrent users, if it was relevant, and then number of concurrent users. There's a problem with this, which I'll go into later. Digital copy, if it's allowed or not allowed, and then list limitations. Scholarly sharing, if it's allowed or not allowed. Data mining, allowed or not allowed. Apparently there's not a lot of this in a lot of our licenses, but we thought that this might be useful down the road. Course reserves, allowed or not allowed. List limitations if applicable. Authorized users, and then ILL if it's allowed or not allowed, and then list limitations if needed. And so this is kind of our guideline of what we thought would be the most important. And of course, we could always change this down the line, but we thought these were enough that it would be helpful to patrons, but also not kind of overwhelm them. But of course, then we would only put in this information if it was found in the license. If it wasn't, then these were just kind of not added. Nothing was added to them. So as of right now, we currently have EBSCO, ProQuest, and Films on Demand license information in GIL Find for Galileo resources. There should be licenses added to. There should be license information added for Ovid and ACS, the American Chemical Society, this fiscal year, but I'm not sure when that'll be added. And then all Galileo resource license terms will be outlined that are in the previous slide. So they all look pretty much the same. So other helpful license information. If your ebook or resource has a limited number of concurrent users, that information would be really helpful to add as well. I know we've had problems where faculty wanted to use materials that only had 1 or 2 concurrent users, and so we would like to add that information. The only problem is that in ebook collections, a lot of them have varying concurrent users. And so like for this one, for example, it says, most 10,000 concurrent users, which I don't know if I would have added that myself, but I think if you can and it's relevant, then you should. My hope is that eventually we'll add concurrent user notes at the portfolio level sometime this year, since many of the titles in our ebook packages have different limits. We have a lot of one user, one book titles that are encyclopedias and textbooks that we purchased from EBSCO. And so we want that information to be visible. But I'm not sure that at the license level will be most helpful, but you can add that information in a public note. So I often wonder to myself, do faculty even look at this? And we did have one faculty member reach out in May regarding course packs. He looked at the title in GIL Find and saw the license agreement there, and he asked if he could inform his students to use it. He also asked if there was a limit to how many students could access it. So like I said, the one user, one book licenses are typically for certain types of materials. So in this case, it does seem that it would be really relevant and helpful to have that information visible instead of having to go to the actual item itself to see if there are concurrent user limits. So this is what kind of started off. I was investigating a lot of copyright compliance, and I stumbled across this page at University of Washington, and they really encouraged their faculty to, in step 1, where it says the UW library is licensed a variety of electronic materials per course. To find out if your readings are licensed, it says to look at the UW license catalog, and then it encourages them to link to individual articles. And I found that to be something that I wanted to strive towards. And so I think that it can help your faculty be more knowledgeable in how they can use library resources, because I think many of them don't know and just don't, and need help along the way to figure out how they can use these resources. So I was going to do a quick demo. Can everybody still see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. So this is what it looks like when I log into Alma. And so if you click on acquisitions on the top menu bar, down here is where it is for licenses. But I often just use this menu for licenses and then just click search. So these are all our license agreements. And so I guess I can just walk you through. But basically, so it looks similar to the one I had shown in my slides, and I'll give you a better idea of what the actual license terms look like. So here is the course pack note, which says allowed, so there's other options for course pack. So course pack print, course pack electronic. So you can click a value which says not applicable, uninterpreted, permitted, prohibited, silent. And so you can add as much or as little as you would like. But I know at VSU, we're trying to keep the license agreements looking the same. So that way, if they look at a Galileo license versus a VSU license, they look similar. And again, you can see that some of this is kind of out of order because this is how I edited it in in the Alma configuration. So they're all kind of weirdly displaced because they're trying to, it is now in a place where they're in the order I want them to display in GIL Find. And so there's a lot of information that you can add to Alma to show your patrons. And you can also put information in the license that does not display. So you can put as much information as you need. And then if there's things that aren't relevant to patrons or you don't want your patrons to see, you can always add it to Alma, but then just make sure that you put it as do not display. So there's a lot of information or a lot of fields that you can populate. And you can also add your own notes, which I showed before. So here's the interlibrary loan note that we added. And so you can also put as much information as you need. And this is the one we added, staff ILL note, which says, these both display. So the interlibrary loan is allowed with restrictions, and then the staff ILL note is must be secure transmission. So you can really customize this as you need to. And then the authorized user definition is down here where you can change that as you need it as well. But again, I've only added it really I only have used the features of license terms and inventory to make sure that that the right licenses are matched with the right inventory itself. And so I'll show everybody what it looks like in the Alma configuration. So if you're in fulfillment under other settings here, this is where you need to make sure you have it enabled. And then under acquisitions this is where all the license information is. And so when you want to manage the license terms, this is all where you put it in what section. So this is why the authorized user definition is in this section, and it's the first thing in the section, and it displays. So all these things, there aren't very many things that display to the user because we wanted to make it as simple as possible. I believe that's it for me. It was a quick presentation. Does anybody have any questions?
If you have any questions, thanks, Jessica. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and raise your hand and I can unmute you, or you can type it into the chat. See if there are any questions coming in.
I did want to add one thing. There is some documentation on my slides about the Ex Libris Knowledge Center for licenses, and also there is documentation on the G3 training wiki. It's a little outdated, so I'm going to work on updating it, but there is information that will at least get you started if you have any questions.
So we have something from Susanna Smith. She says, maybe off topic, but do you post public-facing licenses for databases whose resources do not show up in GIL or Primo?
We don't. No. So if it doesn't have, I don't think we do, at least. It's mostly only collections that have portfolios attached to them. So I don't think so, because we tend to not post just straight. We don't have a lot of just databases in Alma. So we tend to do it for mostly things that have portfolios attached. They typically appear at the portfolio level as opposed to like a collection level. Like we don't have a record for just Sage Premiere 2020. It's the license is attached to the actual collection itself. Does that make sense?
Does that answer the question? You can unmute yourself if it didn't.
Yeah, I think so. I was thinking about, we have a fair number of resources that don't populate into GIL. They're just available through Galileo. But, you know, I was thinking that still there should be a way that people can access licenses for like info-based materials or other things that aren't populating through Primo. They're just populating through Galileo. And I was just wondering about it. We just was kind of off topic, so thanks.
Oh, you mean like in database A to Z? Sorry.
Yeah, some place like that, you know. So we actually purchase a fair number of databases separate from, but that aren't like journal based, that are a little more weird, and like Jove Biology, that you would never find if you looked something up in Primo, but you would find it if you look stuff up in Galileo. So I'll figure something else out for that. But I just realized that was kind of a separate point.
Right. Yeah, I get what you're saying. No, if it's not an Alma, then we don't display the license terms. I haven't really dove into like things that are more just like databasey. Because if the things that we might have that might be more databasey, if it would usually come from Galileo, and so that would be up to them to make sure that that they made them display. And that's one thing I also should add is that everybody that's in a USG institution should see Galileo license terms in their instance right now. But you can't edit them. So those are the one things that those licenses, what they are for, they all look the same for all USG institutions.
Okay, and I'll just add, Susanna, it sounds like that would be a question for Russell or maybe Mike White.
Ken Hensley's the person you want to.
Ken.
Yeah, Ken Hensley's the one that sets them up for me.
Okay, yeah. So you can email Ken your question specifically, or put in a note to the support desk. Okay, let's see. Jim Rickerson has a question. Are you using the same license template for all e-resources?
Yes. So all our resources, I look through the licenses and look for the same 8 terms. So I look for authorized user, course packs, course reserves, ILL, scholarly sharing, and some digital copies. So I look for all the same license terms. And so if they're in the license, I add it. If it's not, I leave it blank. But that's really all I'm looking for, is just those kind of 8 license terms, and I'm populating it. So that's just what works for us here. So I try and keep everything the same. That way, if you're looking at something, a license for ACM and JSTOR and EBSCO, they all look the same. That they're all going to have the same kind of license terms.
All right, we have the third question from Lee Chen. Could you show the configuration fulfillment? Oh, I lost it. Could you show the configuration fulfillment to other settings once more?
Yes, I can do that. Okay, so it's kind of confusing because it's not logical where it's located. So if you're in the Alma configuration, so under fulfillment, and then this is the discovery interface display logic, other settings down here, and then that's where you enable display of license information. All the other license information in the Alma configuration is under acquisitions. So this is the only fulfillment thing. The only fulfillment thing that you need to do is just that ensures that it displays the license information. Hope that question.
Did that help, Lee? Yeah, she says, thanks. See, Joy, I think it's Joy, spelled differently, but I think it's Joy, has a question. If there was information you wanted to enter for a license that was not noted in the license document, did you leave it out or contact the vendor?
I typically just left it out. If there was something, like there are a lot of licenses that don't say anything about course reserves or course packs or sometimes even interlibrary loan. If it's something that I know that we would like to use a certain way, I might reach out to the vendor, but I don't think I have. I think there's been one time where we had a license that the terms didn't really make sense, so I reached out for clarification, but if it's not there, I typically just leave it blank. My assumption is that they probably don't want us doing that. That's why it's not in there.
All right, she says, thanks. Any other questions? Thank you guys for asking questions. If there are any more, I'll give it a few seconds. You can type them into the chat. You can also unmute yourself and ask it.
And if anybody has questions about setting up, that they have any problems setting up along the way, you can always email me. I'm always happy to help set this up because I know sometimes configuring things in Alma can be a real pain. I know that Galileo or Ken Hensley set up the Galileo resources, and then I asked him for screenshots of what he did in the managed license terms, so that way ours would look identical. So I can always send people screenshots of that, which was this screen here. I asked him what it looked like for him, so that way I could just mimic that exactly, so our licenses would look the same. So I can always show that information too if anybody wants to set up their license terms to look like Galileo's.
All right, not seeing any additional questions. I was trying to put Jessica's email address into the chat.
I can do that.
Okay. Did have one more thing come in. Susanna said she'd love a screenshot of that to follow.
If you can just email me, Susanna, so I know what your email address is, I can send you screenshots today.
Great, thank you. All right, well, this has been really informative. I want to thank everyone for attending this session. We have one more tomorrow, and I want to thank Jessica for bringing her presentation to us. It was originally going to be held during our May GUGM 2020 conference that was, of course, canceled. But we really appreciate you doing this today, Jessica, and thank you to everyone for attending. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Bye.